Well, good afternoon, everybody. All right, so I'll do a share screen here in a minute, but I'll kind of stall here just to see if anybody else jumps in. For those on the recording, love to see you live, but we'll go ahead and give it a go here. We're going to touch on, so today we're going to talk about some of the student loan changes. We spoke of this at the Tuesday meeting about a month ago. Taxes and insurance, how we're seeing that kind of impact qualifications. We're going to talk about rates, the market, just even the craziness over what we've seen over the last 7 days. And then we're going to walk through just kind of a general pre-qualification to kind of show you how we actually compute these numbers, and that'll kind of sneak back into taxes and insurance. So just starting off with a few where we normally start here. Let me just get this share screen going. All right, you guys are looking at the my face there. Chris, we good?
Okay. Yep. Yep, you're good.
I think most of you know, but we changed the backdrop on the setting, so thought we'd give it a little bit of a splash with the Cleveland skyline. But just a reminder, the site does have a lot of resources here. In fact, right under the resource tabs, calculators for running payments. And as I mentioned before, you can go through here to pull kind of blog articles, and if you want to kind of take information from that as Kelly, are you admitting people in? Okay, cool. So feel free to, check out the webpage, pull information from it, share it. It'd be great if you credited us, but you don't have to. So just take whatever information you like. And just a reminder, you can apply like a buyer. Oftentimes, how if let's say Kelly was at an open house listing and referred a buyer, they may say, hey, give this person a call. Here's their phone number. Here's their email. So normally what I'll do is call right away. If I get a voicemail, leave a message. If I have an email, I'll send kind of a soft introductory email and put a link to my webpage and say, hey, feel free to call anytime. We can schedule a call or a Zoom. If you'd like to jump right into a pre-approval, here's my webpage. And you go to the apply now button and they can fill in an application in 10 minutes time. That goes to me instantly and I can jump in, start pulling a soft credit pull and get moving real quick. So you'd be surprised how many buyers will do that even before our first conversation. I certainly say kind of the newer, younger generations are even a bit more, open to that. So just want to make sure that you guys know that that is a resource. I don't know why this is opening up here. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to jump into, I guess, some market stuff. So I will ask, feel free if anybody's in the chat, and Chris, if you don't mind moderating the chat for me, does anybody want to take a stab at where the national average interest rates are? So I'm going to jump on the Mortgage News Daily page where, we jump on that start of each Zoom or each call, just to kind of give you a sample of where the market is. The Mortgage News Daily, it's not like Bankrate or like an advertisement. It's meant for like the mortgage world and the mortgage industry. So it is going to list kind of an impartial kind of third-party opinion of where rates are. But does anybody want to take a stab where they think the 30-year average is coming in today? Chris, you see anything out there posted?
No.
All right. All right. Wally. No, I guess not. Well, 7%. So as of this afternoon, the 30-year average is at 1%, and I'm guessing a lot of people are surprised. We've seen with everything that's been going on in the past 5 business days with the tariffs, or I guess going on 6 business days, we've seen a huge, huge shift. So this is what the 30-year interest rate average is from this site. So this April 3rd, April 2nd, which I think was Wednesday, 6.75. April 4th, Friday, 6.6%. Here we are going way back to 2 days ago. Here's yesterday, and here's where we're at today. So there's certainly an economic explanation. I'll let Chris kind of chime in here a little bit, but we're seeing the market just move all over the place. So in short, when the tariffs were announced last week, you saw the stock market kind of tank. And it was a very traditional kind of move where people are taking money out of the risky stock side, putting into treasury bonds, considered a bit more safe. And when that happens, that drives down bond rates, mortgage rates, and that actually flows through to what we see and what we look at it every day in the real estate market. Well, then a bit of a shift when it tanks to a certain point. There's what's called a margin call, and everybody has to sort of cash in, show more cash on hand, and then take whether they're cashing in, not so much stocks. They've already cashed in or lost those. Now they're cashing in on treasury bonds, and now that rate is going back up. And that's a bit of what we're seeing today. And there is it's an emotional roller coaster. What I mean by that is the chain, if the stock markets drop 1% just out of natural behavior, it's the emotion of everybody saying, oh, wait a second, they just dropped 1%, I should sell. And it kind of just snowballs, and you see an acceleration. Likewise, when the bond, or excuse me, the stock markets are moving up. So that's my 2 cents. I will say it's been a while. Financial management was my major in college. Chris, more economics, so you might have a different spin on it. But do you want to go ahead and take a shot at that, Chris?
Yeah. It's kind of a weird situation because you see obviously a big sell-off in the stock market. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see much movement in the bond market. If anything, maybe it's just a tell at kind of the fear and greed kind of calculator there. Obviously, there's a lot of volatility because there's a lot of uncertainty. The big sell-off here in the mortgage, you've got the chart right here. The mortgage-backed security market is very, I don't know, interesting, I think. This feels like an overreaction. So I would hope that maybe we find a floor and it comes back to some normalcy. But I mean, I won't get too much into the technicals, but like look at those candlesticks over the last 3 trading days. Those are huge. I mean, you can see how they normally trade. It's like the floor and the ceiling on these is normally very small. And for the last 3 days, it's been like a complete dump. So I don't know. Hopefully I think we found a new floor here, but it's weird.
Yep. So what we're looking at here, mortgage-backed securities, and the mortgage-backed securities, red is bad in relation to mortgage rates, and this is a 10-year treasury, which the 30-year fixed mortgage or most fixed rate mortgages kind of mirror the movement here. So when you see the 10-year treasury going up, usually the 30 years moving in the same direction. Maybe not, decimal point for decimal point, but pretty darn close. So that's kind of just how we're sort of taking the temperature of this. So as you've heard me say, I popped this chart up before, and usually I said the darker red this is, the darker red Don Jarecki's face. Don's not able to be on the call today, but I guarantee his blood pressure is running high with this as well. So anyway, we just wanted to take a second for there. But the one thing that I will point out, I want to mention, I've mentioned this a few times, but to all the realtors, and I'll quote Ted Lasso to Sam Obiasi, I forgot how to say his name, be a goldfish. Don't remember and constantly keep talking about where interest rates were 4 and 5 years ago. If you're talking to a buyer who's just getting into the market, whether a first-time home buyer or maybe they're a repeat buyer, they don't think interest rates are down around 2 and 3% right now, or even 4 or 5%. Everybody is more or less conditioned to the fact that, they dropped recently last week. By the way, they're back up, and they won't hear all that much about this. But look at this. The interest rates have been over 6% for the past 2 years. So anybody who's been thinking about a house and buying a house in the last 2 years, or excuse me, this is going back 1 year, but anybody who's been thinking about buying a house now, there's going back to December 2022, still net under 6%. So we don't have to kind of say, hey, buyer, I'm glad you're looking at buying a house. Bad news, we're not around 3%. Right, that's history. Everybody knows that. So really the market we're in, and heck, even if you look back over since 2023, remember when interest rates hit over 8%? So I would still argue we're in a very good spot. The first of the year, we really kind of didn't think we'd be anywhere near the mid sixes, and we've been there more than once just in the past 3 weeks. So that's kind of my quick parting shot message there regarding interest rates. Chris, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to people every single day who are actively in the market, some of which are shopping for a lender or shopping around interest rates, whether that's actually speaking to someone or looking online. Quoting someone a 6.5 or a 7% interest rate doesn't have the gut punch that it did in 2022. People have become, I don't want to say accustomed, but they're not surprised to hear where rates are. I mean, if you want to spin a positive, and they're saying, well, rates are 7% again. That's surprising. Well, at least it's not October of 23 when they were 8.4% for a couple of days. So it's like it could be much worse. And I mean, we have some dates that we can point back to as an example. If anything, this should be motivation to lock something in now and buy now rather than wait to see what happens.
And I had one of these conversations. This is refreshing. He was doing a loan application for a customer. She's downsizing from, I don't know, she's selling something at 6 or 7. It's on the market and she's buying a 350 kind of cluster home condo type. And when we run through interest rates, she goes, well, it's better than the 16% I had on my first house. I said, you're right. And if anybody wants a dose of reality, I don't know if anybody remembers Marilyn McCullough, who used to be in the office here. She years ago, she was throwing out a file cabinet and something was wedged behind the drawer, and she brought it in for me. And feel free to stop by the office sometime. But this is from her open house in 1982, American Midwest, 16.25%, paying 3 points. Broadview Savings, not offered, rates too high. Cardinal Federal, 10%. So anyway, if you want a good laugh, feel free to pop that over. But sometimes I'll show that for a little perspective. So, all right, we'll move on from interest rates. But obviously, if you have anybody wants a one-on-one conversation, or hey, I'm about to go meet a buyer and they're really sweating interest rates, feel free to give either of us a call and we'll give you kind of a little bit of a pep talk. All right, we're going to jump over to student loans. So a couple of the last few Tuesday meetings, you've heard us talk about just some of the changes with student loans. And Chris, I'm going to let you kind of take the lead on this here, but in
Sure.
short, since COVID, student loans have been on hold and forbearance for so many. A lot of the rules are changing depending if you have a private or public student loan, public or a government student loan. And what we're seeing is I'll pull someone's credit report with a soft pull. They've never missed a late payment in their life. And now I have a late payment on a student loan. And I say, hey, you've got a late payment on your February student loan payment. They're like, what are you talking about? My student loans are in forbearance. Well, imagine how that conversation goes. And if they're in the process of buying a home, all of a sudden a recent late payment can really tank their credit score and really impact the process, payments and otherwise. But Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a bit of miscommunication between student loans. Obviously, student loans have been under the umbrella of the Department of Education. That department is in some kind of, I don't know. I don't know if it's fully shut down or people are just sent home or if it's operating, at 50%, but there's been some miscommunication in the transition between the two administrations on what's going to happen with student loans. Very quickly, the SAVE Act was kind of shut down by the Trump administration. That was Biden's kind of Band-Aid, so to say, from a couple of years ago. But whenever you do that, the people that were automatically put into forbearance are kind of left in limbo. And it seems like some of them, or a large chunk of them, including Kate, our East Side team leader, she pulled me aside the other day and said, thanks for mentioning this at the team meeting because her student loans kicked back in and she almost missed it. But what's happening is the student loans are just automatically being put back into a payment, and you are expected to make that payment unless you otherwise, renegotiate. For some people, that's happening as early as this month. I've seen some people have next month. I manage my wife's student loans. For whatever reason, I don't know if she knows somebody at the Department of Education and got a favor, but her loan doesn't kick back in until August. What I would recommend, just in an effort to protect your buyers from this unexpected drop in their credit score, is to just check back in, see where you're at, see if you are still in forbearance, when they're planning on kicking you into a payment, and then also checking what type of payment you might have. If you've never set up income-driven repayment plans before, I'm pretty sure they are not even offering that through online websites. You would basically, fill out a paper form, put it in an envelope, give it a kiss, and wish for the best as it sends off to DC. The more likely thing is you just get stuck into a regular standard repayment, which is like, a 20-year amortization. So yeah, I mean, tough topic. Not a whole lot of good news there, but that's kind of what's going on.
And this could snowball too. So the one customer I spoke with, this was I think end of last week, pulled the credit report, had a late payment. And what you got to know about student loans is for this particular customer, he owed I don't know whatever it was $25,000, and had a late payment. But he knew he owed $25,000 to the Department of Education. But what he didn't know is on the credit report it shows up as 4 student loans. One I assume was freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. So instead of having one late payment, he has 4 late payments all in the same month. So having 4 late payments is a lot worse than one late payment, especially when it's last month. So his score was totally tanked. So kind of just that's our PSA. So what is going to jump into next, and feel free, obviously, if anybody has any questions, jump in the chat or just unmute yourself and fire away, please. So what I was going to walk through is qualifications. I'm going to kind of back into this for taxes and insurance, but let me just moved over here. I was just going to walk through a real generic topic on qualifying here. So let's say customer calls. Let's say Elliot meets a first-time home buyer at an open house or is referred by a friend or whatever the case might be. And we get into a conversation and says, yeah, let's get a pre-approval, pre-qualification going. I just want to walk you through, we've done this a few times in the past, but just how we determine qualifications. This is a very, very general ballpark. Nothing here is set in stone, but just to kind of give you an idea of the math. So let's say this customer, let's say they're just a single whatever, they work in, they're an engineer, they make $72,000 a year salary, pretty cut and dry. We are analyzing always the monthly amount. So let's say they make $6,000 a month. Let's say this buyer has excellent credit. Every loan program, conventional, FHA, VA, there's a debt to income ratio that drives how much they can lend. So this is kind of the equation I'm going to take you through. So let's say that the buyer has a very, very strong buyer and we can qualify them with a debt ratio of 50%. So what that means is we're taking their gross monthly income, cutting it in half and saying, okay, their max allowable debt is $3,000. So let's say this customer has, say, a $400 car payment. Let's say have a, I don't know, $100 student loan payment. Sorry. Oops. That's more often the case, $1,000. Let's go with that. And let's say they got $200 in credit cards. So subtract that out. What's left over? $2,300. So that is what we say, okay, this buyer can carry a mortgage payment of $2,300. So let's separately say, okay, well, let's take a 250 house, $6,000 a year. And let's say that the buyer's got homeowners insurance of $1,500. Now remember, we're always estimating homeowners up front, but a buyer has to go and get their own policy. So in this example, sorry, I've got my other screen loading up here. You've got principal and interest. I'm using like a 6.75% interest rate of $1,572 on that house. $125 for homeowners insurance. $500 a month based on those taxes, and then PMI $101. So PMI, just to remind you, it's going to be different for everybody. PMI it's kind of like life insurance. Someone's PMI, if somebody is let's say they're a 25-year-old marathon running non-smoker with perfect health, they're going to have a pretty low life insurance policy. If they are the next, life insurance customer is a 72-year-old smoker, obese, who's been, on their third heart attack, their life insurance is going to be much, much higher for that same policy. PMI kind of works the same way. If you've got somebody, even if they're putting the minimum down, but has great credit, a low debt to income ratio, long payment history, they're going to get a better PMI rate than somebody who is, 4 years out of a bankruptcy with a higher debt ratio and a bunch of other variables. So just keep in mind PMI does vary. And I'll put in a quick tease. One of these days, I am going to put on my class having a PMA about PMI. That is a positive mental attitude about private mortgage insurance. So that's a teaser for what's to come. But just to stay on that one for a second. So in this example here, total monthly payment is $2,300. So going back to this customer, this is right at the tippy top. If we go through a pre-approval and get them approved for this 50% debt ratio, this house just makes it by $1.11. It's no coincidence I reverse engineered these numbers, but does that make sense? Kind of how I came up with that? Right. Elliot's nodding, so I'll take that as representation for the group. Now, let's say that this customer is buying an area with higher taxes, or let's just say taxes went up on this particular home. Or here's a more likely example. Let's say buyer calls me and says, "Hey, here's a house for 250. Zillow says the taxes are 6,000." And then I go and look up the property address, and the taxes are actually 7,200. Maybe it's because taxes just went up, or the information in there was just wrong, or maybe there's a homestead exemption that no longer qualifies. So I've got to now bump up the taxes to $600 a month. Now the payment is $2,398, so roughly $2,400 a month. I've got a problem because that $100 adjustment, I'm too high on this house. So the buyer says, "Well, I really want that house. How can I qualify?" Well, go make more money. Easier said than done, but we'll always look to see, is there a pay raise, is there a bonus or commission or overtime, maybe something we were counting, something more dramatic like a co-signer or a co-borrower being added. Or maybe we look at, hey, can we pay off the credit cards, or maybe pay off the student loan, or pay down the car payment. So a reminder on installment loans: if a car loan or any installment loan is going to be, if it's got a balance where it will be paid off in less than 10 months, that can be paid down where we don't have to count that as a debt. So there are creative ways, but my point here is we really got to know where property taxes are when a customer is shopping around. And Chris, myself, Don are very, very vocal about this, as opposed to saying, "Hey, here's a pre-approval letter, call me when you buy a house." We're very, "Hey, here's your pre-approval for a 250 house, as long as the taxes are below 6,000 a year. So keep an eye on those taxes. Oh, by the way, Elliot, as the buyer's out shopping, we're really cutting it close on the debt to income ratio. So let's keep in touch on the taxes and such." Or if you're looking at a condo, oh, there's an HOA fee of $250. Well, we're going to blow past this right away. So we have to be real strategic, and we're always trying to get these numbers to kind of stay in front of these numbers and keep these numbers back in front of us as they're out there looking. So with property taxes jumping up as they have, and everybody knows Northeastern Ohio, you pick 3 random communities and take a $250,000 house, the taxes may range from $4,000 a year to $9,000 a year. And there's no real rhyme or reason for it from a buyer standpoint. Homeowners insurance. Homeowners insurance, it used to be a $250 house. Insurance you might get for anywhere between $900 to $1,400 a year. You can see double that. I had a buyer who was had a 325 house. The insurance came back at $3,900 a year. That's almost $333 a month. That can impact someone's qualifications. Going back to the debt to income ratio, those are the variables that we're kind of battling on a daily basis from house to house. And we just have to try and be aware as much as possible. So, you kind of run into that property where, oh, there's a second parcel I forgot to tell you about. It's a little strip of land, but the taxes are an extra $300 a year. That's $25 a month. May not seem like a lot, but that $25 a month is equivalent to $4,000 in buying power. So you don't have to know these numbers. I just want to share this just to say, okay, on our side of the laptop, the Zoom, or the phone call, these are the numbers we're putting into play. And we're all about communication. You can never over communicate in my mind. So sharing information, especially when somebody's kind of cutting it close, or maybe kind of, trying to break through the ceiling of where the qualifications are. We wanted to let you know where these numbers are coming from. Now, obviously, sometimes the other way around. Sometimes we're kind of saying, yeah, on that 250 house with $6,000 a year tax. Well, I have someone who's looking in that price range in Jefferson. Can't remember if that's Ashtabula County. the taxes are dirt cheap there. So now all of a sudden saying, oh, okay, the taxes are going to be under 4,000, under 3,000 a year. You can now go to 275 or 280 or 290. So it does go both ways, but obviously we're more worried that someone's going to end up finding a house that's outside their qualifying range. But do know that we'll strategize with them. And this I will speak to, obviously, Chris, Don, myself, we're local, so we've got a pretty good feel on taxes in the area. But if you're working with an out-of-state lender, there's many reasons to be, concerned: appraisal, communication, time zone, things like that. But I can't tell you how many times someone comes with, "Hey, Sean, can you give this person a call? They were pre-approved with Rocket Mortgage or whomever, and the taxes are coming in a lot higher than they budgeted for, and they longer qualify. Can you kind of jump in and save the day?" And absolutely, we'll give every effort, but we'd much rather the buyer have known, going into what the limitations were, and for that to be communicated to you. So anyway, I'll pause for a second, take a sip of water, let you guys chime in. But Chris, anything you want to add there?
I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but HOA can also really throw off the DTI if you haven't, you know, prepared for that. Maybe not if it's, I mean, if the ratios you're showing here are so tight that, yeah, a $300 a year HOA for, just maintaining the entrance to the community could throw the numbers off a little bit. But I'm more thinking like condos. Someone says, oh, I have a budget for 200,000. They find a condo even downtown for 200,000. And they're like, this is great. Can you believe the price on this thing? Only to find out that the parking and the fitness facility are $1,000 a month.
Mhm.
And that's why it's so cheap. So it's just something to keep in mind and keep an eye out for.
Yeah, it's when someone says I'm looking at, oh, those the Gold Coast, seldom are those HOA fees, but below $700, and they're usually four figures. Van Aken, you see those properties anywhere from $35 to $110,000 in HOA fees that might jump up over 1,100. And even just as Chris said, the community I live in, it's $175 yearly HOA fee just to have two light bulbs pointing at the sign with a few flowers behind it, around it. That can make a difference for somebody real tight. And obviously sometimes there's that middle ground as well. So that's why every transaction, is, as opposed to saying, what's your income, where have you been working, what do you have saved up, where are you looking, what communities are you considering? And I make notes on that. Are you looking at single family, condos, duplexes? Because all of these kind of come into play. So cool. Anybody have any questions on that? No. We are, I tell you, we do a lot of post-closing marketing. After a house closes, we do a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, a lot of flyers and postcard, kind of mailers to stay in touch. You know what generates the most phone calls? Hey, Sean, my payment just went up and I don't know why. I thought I had a 30-year fixed. And the answer is yes, your mortgage did not change one single penny, but your taxes and insurance went up. So as most people know, Cuyahoga County, their 6-year sextennial, or whatever the word might be, tax adjustment came in, reappraisals came in, and I'm seeing taxes go all over the place. You heard me say it in the Tuesday meeting, but I had a customer calling about refinancing. I said, hey, good news, we can refinance you and lower your payment about $275, but you saw that tax bill, right? Holding my fingers. Oh yeah, I know, I got hammered. This individual's tax amount went from just over $7,000 a year to just under $14,000 a year. So his payment, while mortgage was going to save him about $275, his taxes were going up somewhere around $6,000. Consumers are feeling that. So much so that I think as people and, with the economy that the recession that we may already be in or may be headed towards, likewise with affordability going up, potentially unemployment going up, or excuse me, affordability going down, and taxes amount kind of impacting kind of the day-to-day spend, unemployment potentially changing. There is a possibility of people needing to sell while they have equity, which I think is a great place, a great time to do it. A lot of people wait for calamity to hit to turn around and sell, but everybody's got equity in their properties these days. So I guess my point is, over the next 6 and 12 months, you may see customers who want to list and sell their house just because their taxes have put them out of their comfort zone. So my message is to you as realtors is to stay in contact with your previous customers as much as possible, just in case, they're in a situation like that. Last summer, I shared, we had done one of our firesides about the taxes. We shared the Cranes article with that horrible map about what communities were having the highest percentage adjustment. But, being in touch with somebody on that, just with that information is key. So, does anybody want to touch on taxes or homeowners insurance? Okay. All right. So, fast track. So the pre-qualification. So when I just ran through all these numbers, that was kind of an example of a conversation I might have with first-time home buyer. Elliot, did you have something?
Sean, I just want to ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was under the impression or learned a long time ago. For example, if you had a car loan, you only had 6 months left on it, it would not be charged as debt service. Is that still a fact? Because I thought I heard you say 10 months just a few minutes ago.
It is 10 months. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have the 10-month rule. There is an exception where if like your debt ratio is between 45 and 50, there's a layering risk analysis that's done. But so let's say this customer, let's say that let's walk through a quick scenario here. So remember this customer where I said, let's say the taxes are $700 a month, which is not out of line. So on this buyer here, of course, Elliot, no short answers with me, so bear with me. So in this house now that they want to buy, their payment is coming in at $2,500, and I got just done telling them, hey, no, you got to keep that payment under $2,300. Well, how can I make that work? Well, one way is we can increase your max allowable debt ratio if we pay off a credit card, or hey, let's take a look at that car loan. Maybe they owe $5,000 on that car loan. I'll tell you what, you're going conventional, you're putting 5% down, whatever the case might be. Can you maybe do a double payment between now and closing and get that to under 4,000? They make those payments, we verify that. We no longer have to count that as a debt. And now this number goes to 2,700. We're back in the green zone, being able to qualify for that house. So we'll absolutely strategize. So anything that's an installment debt, car leases don't count because while there might only be 3 months left on that lease, we assume there's going to be another one to take its place because you're losing that car. Exceptions can be made, but that's kind of the norm. FHA also has this rule, but they have a goofy kind of secondary where if that payment is more than 5% of your monthly income, they say no, it's got to be paid off entirely. So VA has a similar rule. So yeah, it's an absolute strategy, and we've that has absolutely made or break customers, and that I used to say it's a crafty veteran move. It's common sense. Any loan officer should be able to do that and figure that out pretty quick, but you'd be surprised how many kind of overlook that. So it's one of the first things that I look at it when I'm doing the initial pre-qualification.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Good. So this kind of scenario is what I consider a pre-qualification. As most of you know, we have the pre-approval, which says, okay, you told me where you work. Now send me your pay stubs and W-2s. You told me you've got money in the bank. Send me your bank statements. And obviously there's other layers to that as well. And with that information, we run that through an automated underwriting system with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or FHA or VA. This system comes back and gives us, as I say, the green light. And now we're able to issue that pre-approval letter, and they can take that and run. And I always say the pre-approval is as good as the loan officer who gave it, because some of you know you can get a pre-approval, you could submit an application online, never talk to some person, and have a pre-approval in someone's email, and that's pretty weak. As I tell any customer, or excuse me, any realtor, when you read that pre-approval, even if it's mine, I usually do a follow-up phone call just to say, hey, got a pre-approval. Here's a quick, bullet points, what you need to know. But if it's not Chris, Don, myself, or even if it is, if it's especially a loan officer that you haven't worked with before or don't know, call them and say, hey, how long you been in the business? How long you been with this company? Anything I need to know? What are the taxes you're using to qualify this buyer? I mean, your reputation is on the line with that offer as much as anybody else in the process. So if I'm a buyer's agent, I'm gonna make sure everything's rock solid. And on the listing agent side, same thing. I'm not taking that house off the market or considering it an offer until I have a pre-approval letter and have a conversation with that listing agent. By the way, Chris, Don, myself are available at the oddest of hours. If you need us to call a listing agent or feel a call, we're more than happy to do that. So pre-approval, I said it gets run through automated underwriting system, ideally with documents in hand for validation. Fast track approval. I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I had a few agents actually take me up on it, but we will take that pre-approval to the next step and actually fully process the file, do any income or asset verifications we do need to do with our processing department, and submit it through to our actual underwriter, who is there to validate and authenticate, authorize the pre-approval. And that allows me to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller or Mr. or Mrs. Listing Agent, this loan has been fully underwritten through our fast track approval process. We don't need any more income or asset documents. All we need is a contract, title work, homeowner's insurance, and appraisal, and we'll be able to close this in 10 days. That makes a difference. No, it's not a cash offer, but it's the next best thing. Obviously there's an appraisal requirement. If sometimes there's a waiver and we don't need an appraisal, but if there is an appraisal there, that can be fast tracked. Maybe there's an appraisal gap, so you can make this as rock tight as possible. Title issues, if those were to come up, usually it's on the seller side, so our buyers should be clear for the most part on that. But so fast track, it's free, it's easy, it's fun. Maybe not fun, but it's free and easy, and might as well get the paperwork process out of the way up front. Take out any margin for error and just make your buyer, or you as the buyer, a better buyer in the eyes of the seller. So anyway, that's our fast track approval. Chris, did I miss anything on that?
I don't think so.
Oh. And I can give you some straight up success stories where I've had a buyer who is fast track approved. Seller was motivated by a quick close and had a alternate cash offer. But guess what? My buyer's offer was higher. And they said, because this is fast track approved, and if you really think you can close in 2 weeks, we'll do it. And they held our feet to the fire. We closed it, and that was a success story. And that really, really does happen. When a listing agent calls and says, hey, is this one of your fast track approvals? And I say no, I almost think, oh, I wish that buyer would have listened to me, or I wish that realtor would have pushed a little bit harder, because it may have made the difference. But ultimately, that is an option that everyone has. So that we touched on the fast track, the student loans, general qualification, taxes, and insurance. Couple of other just heads up. Since we did the last fireside, a couple of changes. FHA, we won't go into the stories behind these. You can reach Chris or myself one-on-one, but FHA did make a change. FHA will no longer lend to somebody who is not a permanent resident alien, that is a green card or a U.S. citizen. So if you have somebody who is here on an H-1B1 work visa, they're absolutely here legally. They can buy a house. They can get a mortgage. FHA is no longer financing option for them. It's effective. I think any application made after, I believe it's May 25th. Also, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have gotten rid of their SPCPs. Feel free to Google that if you're really interested. But in short, it's a down payment. It's the initiative for down payment assistance for low to moderate income buyers and some other classes as well. So we still have our Smart Start 2% grant. We still have OFA. Community Promise was pulled back, and I'll use the term sunsetted. But a lot of lenders who are running with these similar grant programs are no more, or have either gone away or will be going away. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Pretty much all the customers I have that have been counting on that, we've had conversations, they've closed, they've already bought, or they kind of meet the date requirements for that. But that's kind of a PSA for the whole lending industry. Some of the grants are changing and become ineligible. Other ones may be coming out to replace them, but anything kind of the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac driven, we're seeing that change. So anyway, didn't want to end on a bad note, but I just wanted to make sure that was out there for everyone's awareness. Chris,
OFA's still there.
What's that?
OFA's still available.
Yeah, OFA's still there. As we've talked about in here, there's pros and cons with OFA, but they got a pretty darn good interest rate. It looks real good right now, considering what we've seen happen with interest rates over the past 3 or 4 business days. But yeah, overall in the market, I would say we're for us in our branch, we're tracking about where we were, maybe slightly better than last year. You know, for Mike Rapaski, he's mentioned in the meetings here and there. And if you got a minute to talk about the market, he loves talking about Marple. That is March and April are in essence not 1 month, but one assessment, because with Easter being late this year, you've got my kids are both done with their spring breaks, but there's other people whose spring breaks aren't starting until April 20th. So that kind of slows down that purchase market, leaves that little window between spring break and when the kids are getting out of school. So that does impact the market for whatever reason. So well, I know what reason. I have 2 kids, and you know, everything revolves around them and their schedules, sports schedules, as well as school schedules. So, you know, for what that's worth. But anybody have any questions on what we covered, or frankly what we didn't cover today? No. And Chris, anything we've seen in the chat?
Nope.
No?
Good.
Okay. Well, as everybody knows, you got myself, Chris, Don. If anyone's not available, we pinch hit, the next one will step in. If there's any questions anybody has, whether it's related to this or anything else, call me, email, text me, Chris as well, and eventually, well, and also Don. But yep, great to see everybody. For those who I got to see yesterday at the event, the Q2 event, that was phenomenal. I thought it was a great location, great topics, and got to see a lot of people I hadn't seen in a little while. So it was good to see everybody, and thanks for joining us here today.